Hi everyone, Bill Lethman here for Money Evolution. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about home buying rules. Now, your home is likely going to be the biggest purchase that you're ever going to make in your lifetime. So in today's video, what I want to talk about are some rules that you should keep in mind when you're going out and buying a house. Whether it's the very first time you're buying a house, or maybe it's an upgrade where you're going into maybe a bigger house, or it could even be a downsizing situation where maybe you're getting close to retirement and you're going to downsize your home. So these are some things to keep in mind when making that purchase that can really save you from making what I think are some very big mistakes. And although we don't always classify our house as an investment, making a bad housing purchase can really sink our finances very quickly if we're not following some of these rules. And actually, as we're going to talk about in another video that I'm going to film probably later today, should be going up on the YouTube channel here within a few days, we're going to be talking about, is your home actually an investment? And although we don't classify it as that, there's some things that we can do where that home purchase can actually help us to build some wealth. Okay, so let's dive right in. So rule number one is knowing how much home you can afford. I'm just going to indicate there with a dollar sign. So if you talk to a mortgage lender, they're going to tell you that you can afford a total housing payment that's up to about 28% of your gross income. And by total housing payment, that's going to include not only your payment that you're going to have every month, principal and interest, but also any taxes or insurance as well. And 28% I think is very high. My personal rule of thumb is to keep that number much lower, probably for most of us between 20 and 25%. So what that means, let's just take an example here. Let's say that you make $200,000, and if we divide that out by 12 to a monthly number, that's going to be $16,666 a month. If we multiply that by 0.28, that means our total housing purchase can actually be $4,666. So if you think about that, that's a lot of money, and if we start taking a look at, what we're likely going to get after we pay our income taxes, so obviously $16,666, that's the amount we get before we have to pay those taxes. So we've got income taxes that are going to come off of that. Hopefully we're doing some saving. And just those two things alone bring our net income down to about $10,000, and that $4,000 is then going to be actually about half of the total dollars that we actually have available to spend. And depending on what situation you're at in life, 10% for savings is really kind of a minimum. So if you go ahead and you get that housing purchase all the way up at that 28% level, you're going to probably struggle a little bit, in my opinion. I think that's going to make things very tight and very restrictive, for you to have a lot of financial mobility. Rule number two is always put down at least 20% as a down payment. I know there's a lot of mortgage programs out there that let you put less than 20% down. A couple common ones would be obviously like an FHA type of a loan. The other one is if you go conventionally and you don't put 20% down, you're going to have to pay something called PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. And I've taken a deeper dive on this and I think some other videos. We also have a great guide for home buying that we're going to have over on our resource center for Money Evolution. We'll have some links below the video where you can go over, access not only that guide, but some of the other downloads and free videos and things like that that are over there that are not here on the YouTube channel. But what I talk about in some of those guides is how PMI and an FHA loan can actually cost you literally thousands of additional dollars. And when you go to talk to a mortgage person, a lot of times it gets very confusing, and if you don't understand how some of this stuff works, it ends up getting wrapped up into your total amount that you're borrowing, and like I said, it literally does cost you thousands of dollars. And I've actually gone so far in my resource guide where I actually calculate the interest rate that you're actually paying by not having that full 20%, and some of those interest rates actually hit well above 10%. It's almost like a credit card type of an interest rate. So I'm not going to get into quite as much detail here in today's video on that, because I could make literally a whole other video just talking about FHA and PMI and how some of those mortgage intricacies work. But just know that you should put 20% down, and unfortunately that might mean in some cases that you have to save money a little bit longer and maybe delay that housing purchase. But I think in the long run, I think that's going to be well worth it. Number three on the list is to have a reserve. And I think this is something that obviously makes sense, but if you're buying a house and you're saving up for that down payment, you want to make sure that you have some money that's still in a savings account, essentially, where you can have that money liquid, especially if it's your new house. Or first-time house purchase, rather. There's a lot of things to buy. I remember when my wife and I bought our first house, it's things like we need a trash can. It's like we don't have a place. We go to take the first kitchen bag out of the kitchen, and well, where do we put it? So running up to Home Depot continuously. Oh, the leaves are falling. We need a rake. We need a shovel. We need all of that stuff. And so that tends to be some pretty big purchases. If you think about all of those things, as you're moving into a new house, you may do a little remodeling, or even just buying some paint, or you need furniture. So you want to have a reserve. That's really tough to say how much you should have, but if you've just saved the bare minimum to get that down payment and you're going into a house without having some money set aside for that reserve, I think that's going to be a very big mistake. So make sure that you are keeping some money aside. Number 4 is what everybody talks about when buying a house, and that's location, location, location. And obviously, if you're going to put that big of an investment into a home, you want to do some research on the area that you're looking at. And even if you don't have kids, you want to look at what are the schools like in that area? How safe are the neighborhoods? What are some of the city amenities that they might have? And maybe talk to neighbors that or people that already live in the neighborhood and see what their opinions are about things. But location is going to really make a big difference, and I think ultimately in the long run, hopefully have that housing purchase maybe even grow your wealth for you, actually, where you're getting some additional appreciation from that by choosing a good location. So do some research on that. Number 5 is going to be don't overpay for your house. And this is something I want to spend a little bit more time on here, because I think this is a big one. I think our housing purchases tend to be a little emotional. We walk into a house and we see the fresh paint and carpet, the nice neighborhood, and we kind of get overtaken a little bit by emotion, thinking we picture ourselves in that house, and maybe if we've got kids, the bedroom that our kids are going to have their room in, and a lot of times we kind of put that emotion above what is common sense or what makes sense from a purchase. So one of the things that we really want to understand, maybe once you've kind of dialed your housing purchase down to a couple specific locations, is you want to do some research. And if you're working with a realtor, which I believe you should, you have the realtor run some comps for that area. And you want to look at some of the recent home sales that have occurred in that neighborhood. And what you want to do is you want to look at something called price per square foot. And that's going to be your main driver for determining how much money you should pay for that house. And so what you're going to find as you start to get multiple comparisons there is you're going to find kind of an upper range and a lower range for what that price per square foot is. And that way it kind of levels the playing field. So if you're looking at a house here that has 2,500 square feet, and you're looking at a house over here that has 2,700 square feet, by narrowing it down to the price per square foot and then kind of dividing that out into the price that they're asking, you can get an idea of whether or not that house that you're thinking about buying or maybe putting an offer on is at the upper end of that or the lower end of that. Now, a lot of neighborhoods, like our neighborhood that we happen to live in, has a lot of different kinds of houses. They've got some new construction houses. They've got some houses that are, I think, 50, 60 years old that really haven't had hardly anything done to them. They've got some houses that are 50 or 60 years old that have had a lot of new work done to them. So, you got to understand the neighborhood a little bit. And if you're looking at a house that's maybe one of those older homes, then you can get an idea of, that upper range. What did those houses look like? And you can go take a drive-by. Even though those houses aren't for sale, you can drive by, you can see, maybe tell a lot from just the outside of the house. Does it look like that's a house that's been updated or renovated? And if you're looking at the houses at the lower end of that, more than likely those are going to be houses that maybe needed a lot of work. So that gives you a little bit of an idea there. Then as you're looking at your home purchase, you can kind of see, where your house that you're thinking about fits into that, the house that any way that you're looking at. And then you can go through and say, okay, well, this is the house, and maybe it's a little bit under that upper end, but maybe it needs a new roof, or maybe it needs some paint and carpet. And then you go through and you start making a list of all of those things that need to be updated in that house to get that equivalent to that upper end. And so one of the things that I believe can really be kind of a wealth accumulator here with real estate is to buy a house that needs some work that maybe a lot of people would walk into and not necessarily have that vision for what the house could look like when it's all fixed up. And you could maybe determine, let's say that upper end of a house would be, let's say, a $300,000 house. And maybe that house right now is listed for $225,000. And let's say that you think you can put $25,000 into that house, and that house is going to be equivalent to the other houses that are selling for $300,000. And maybe that's an extreme example here, but you can see very quickly how you can actually grow some wealth by doing this, by making a smart housing purchase. So know what the price per square foot is. Do some research. It's going to take some additional time. You might have to look at a lot more houses, and you might have to pass some houses by that don't meet that criteria because they're either overpriced or they don't meet the criteria that you're essentially looking for there. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that, and don't be afraid to put a low offer in as well. So just because they're asking $300,000 for a house doesn't mean that you can't come in. If you think that the fair price of that house is $275,000 or $250,000, put that offer in. I know some realtors say they don't like to put the low offers in, but if you're working with somebody that's on your side, they shouldn't have any problem putting in that low offer, especially if that's what the comps in the neighborhood support. Rule number 6 is kind of along the same lines, and that's don't over improve. And so this is something that we see all the time, and basically what I mean by that is, you want to know what the neighborhood can support. So if you've got a neighborhood that has houses in it that are $150,000, this is an extreme example, and it needs a new kitchen, you're probably not going to put a $50,000 kitchen in a house that's only worth $150,000, and that's kind of what I mean by that. So you want to look at that, and again, know where your comps are, know what you paid for it, and if you're going into a purchase, knowing that it's going to need a new kitchen, you got to think about, what kind of kitchen, kind of supports that neighborhood, and how much is that kitchen going to cost. And it might be a $15,000 or $20,000 kitchen that kind of supports in that $150,000 price range. But you want to understand that and know that, even though you may want all these fancy high-end appliances, you're never going to get that money back out of it if you over-improve the property for what the neighborhood's going to support. Because smart buyers are still always going to come back to this price per square foot, and that's what they're going to be willing to pay with that. Number 7 is get an inspection. And so another personal story here. So when my wife and I were getting married, we were actively looking for a house, and we found a house that we really fell in love with, and we put an offer in on it. The offer was accepted, contingent on an inspection. So that's another important thing to do, is when you put your offer in, always want to leave yourself that contingency factor for the inspection. So anyway, our inspector went out, looked at the house, and peeled back some carpeting that was kind of rolled up in the basement there. And behind it, there were some water stains on the wall in the basement. So clearly, that basement had some serious flooding issues. And when you started looking closer in some of the utility rooms and things like that, it was clear that basement had water in it at some point. And so we ended up pulling our offer back and said, hey, that's not something we are prepared to deal with at this time, and walked away from it. And my wife in particular was really upset about it. Again, these housing things can be, pretty emotional, especially when you kind of fall in love with what you think is the perfect house. But, don't be afraid to walk away. Talk with some people, make sure you get a good inspector. They should be up on the roof. They should be, peeling under, shingles, looking at things, looking at the brickwork, going up in the attic, looking at electrical systems. Every inspection that I've had on a house, and I've had multiple, they usually give you a pretty good binder with all of the different mechanicals in the house, and they should be able to give you some idea on how much life some of those mechanicals have, like how long they think the furnace should be able to last, or how old it is, how many years left on the roof, and that type of thing. And that's going to be very important for you to get that inspection. And if you uncover something big at an inspection, let's say they say, hey, the furnace is really old and probably has a good chance that it might not even last another year or two, it doesn't mean you walk away from the house. In our case, we had water in the basement. That was something way beyond what we wanted to deal with. But you say, hey, the furnace needs to get replaced. We think it's going to cost $7,000 to fix that. Go back to the owner and say, hey, we put an offer in for $157,000. Can you knock $7,000 off because we think we need a new furnace? And you only can say no. If they say no, then you can go back and say, well, hey, do my numbers still hold up to pay that same price, knowing that I might need to get a furnace in a year or two? Then go ahead with it. But in many cases, the owner will come back down off the price. And you have to think about it from the seller's point of view too. The seller already thinks that they've sold their house. So when that offer comes in and it's all been accepted and everything, it's contingent on the inspection. They don't have to worry about the open houses and sitting down for dinner, and then the realtor calls and say, hey, we got somebody that wants to come by and look at your house at 7, and you're scrambling. I know this because we've done this when we've sold houses. It's really a hassle. And to think about putting that house back on the market and having to deal with all of that is the last thing that they want to do. So most of the time, a seller will go back and negotiate that. And so keep that in mind. Do an inspection, and then the last one is well, I guess that was the last one. But don't forget to negotiate. And I think that's something when you get something back on the inspection, or even if it's as you're putting those offers in, things that you might want in the house. Things like. In fact, our house, when we sold it, I had a nice theater system set up in our basement, and that was one of the things, unfortunately, we ended up giving to the buyer, as part of the deal. They asked for it. We felt it was kind of fair with where we were negotiating, and so we ended up giving that away in the house. So there's things like that you can do. If there's things that are fixtures or whatever, you can always, almost anything in real estate is negotiable. So, kind of be creative as it comes to that. So there you have it. Those are, if I can make that smaller here, get everything on one screen. Those are 8 things, 8 rules to kind of keep in mind as you're making a housing purchase. Again, it's a very big decision, and I think being smart about some of those things as you're going into a housing situation can really help set you up for some future financial success. And if you don't follow some of these rules, they can be things that can haunt you for many years down the road. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video today. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also hit that little notification bell. That way, anytime we're posting something new, you get a notification. And also check out the links below. We've got our Money Evolution Resource Center that has a lot of additional information, PDFs, other videos that are not here on our YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. Totally free to get into that. And I'll see you back here in one of our next videos. Have a great day. Thanks.